Hello everyone, and welcome back to Todos Santos. Today we're going to be picking up right where we left off and filling in this area between the freeway and the neighborhood that we made last episode. While the main focus of this episode, the social housing project, will be coming later, we're going to start off with just a quick build of a little bit of a shopping center, just like the one that you see here in San Juan. That's right off the freeway. So I'm not going to be recreating it or anything, but I'm just going to be using that location as inspiration and taking a few little details from it. I thought this part of the city needed something a little bit more modern, a little bit more car-centric in terms of commercial, so I wanted to do a little bit of that development. And I figured that the best place to do that would be along the freeway, both in terms of practicality for the build, and in terms of where you'd find this sort of development within the city. And I'm just starting with a very simple parking lot. Right now I'm using Move It to copy and paste the spaces, but earlier you might have seen when I was placing the initial parking space assets down, I have started using a mod, a very cool mod called Parking Lot Snapping, I believe, which I think I mentioned before. But this is the first time I've remembered to actually mention it when I'm using it in a build. But it just makes it a lot easier to put this kind of thing together, because you don't have to micromanage the position of the parking spaces for the most part. And saving that time just allows you to move on to bigger and better things a lot sooner, like micromanaging the position of this frontage road here, which I just wanted to kind of make it a little bit more logical, because it's easy to just set up a frontage road, or really any kind of road, and not make adjustments for the particular type of development you're doing. But I thought that since this is a little bit more recent, they would have not been opposed to dedicating lanes to enter and exit the parking lot, because in theory, at least, this is going to be a fairly popular shopping center that people can access from the neighborhood we made, but also from the freeway. So it would be a destination where people would come to from all over the city. And that's why it's such a car-centric location with such a gigantic parking lot. But I have to say, it is quite fun to use the intersection marking tool in combination with Traffic Manager to make that sort of intersection with all these dedicated turn lanes and stuff. Because I think that just adds a lot of believability to the city to get those markings and to get that kind of lane usage. And plus it helps with traffic as well, I think. And I tried to make this shopping center sign that, has a sign for every one of the businesses there. It's kind of an iconic look, but it doesn't look the greatest because I was pretty limited in terms of the sign assets I had. I'm sure there's something suitable for this on the workshop, but I just, I was in the mood to put something together myself and not have to close out of the game and go find something new on the workshop. Which, if you don't play the game with a lot of mods or assets, that's at minimum, like a 20-minute process. So it's just not worth it most of the time. I didn't realize at this point that I had put these signs down backwards. It didn't even occur to me that the text was mirrored on the back side of the sign. Somehow I just completely missed that. And then I learned a lesson here. Don't use the vanilla bulldozer tool in a place where you have a bunch of roads placed down, because this is going to happen twice in a row. Because it's just very indiscriminate. Like sometimes you'll click once and it kind of like locks it into a certain type of asset. So if you delete a road, it'll delete any other road that it highlights once the first one is gone, if that makes sense. So if you have like a skinny road like I had there above a big one, like the parking lot road, it'll delete all of them if you're not very, very, very careful. And even if you are careful, you'll still screw it up sometimes. Anyway, I had those roads running around the outside of the parking lot road just because I don't believe the parking lot road counts as like a road that emergency services can use to access a building. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think that's the case. So I just ran a few roads around and turn them into the invisible versions so that these buildings can have access to fire protection and police and ambulances and that kind of stuff. Because otherwise they'll start throwing off messages that they don't have services, and that just really bugs me. And I usually like my cities to be somewhat functional and not have everyone complaining all the time. So for the most part, this is a pretty standard American-style shopping center, but there's one little thing in the real deal that stands out to me, and it is the fact that it has parking on top. At least, the one I'm using for inspiration does, and I wanted to kind of replicate that odd little detail. It maybe isn't quite the right place to do this because this isn't a very urban, very highly developed place like it is in real life, but I just wanted to go ahead and do it anyway because why not? And the more I've been building this city, the more completely I've come to the conclusion that when I have an idea to do something, I just need to do it because if I, wait for the perfect spot or wait for just the right moment to do a build, someday the save is going to corrupt or something like that, or I'm going to run out of motivation for the city in particular. And, if I don't do things when I think of them and when I think that they'll be fun, then I'm just going to potentially miss out on that sort of build. And I'd like to do the builds that I find to be fun and that I think would be enjoyable to do. Because like I mentioned before, it's just a game and I like to have fun when I'm playing it. So even though this might not make sense, that they would invest in this kind of infrastructure that's fitting for a more dense place when there's, plenty of space around here and it wouldn't be that expensive to just buy a little bit of extra land for an extra parking lot. I'm just going to ignore that. But really, I would like to find a balance. Like, I don't want to do anything too ridiculous or too unrealistic. But I just don't want to get caught up in those little details that kind of nag at me when I think about them too much. So I don't want them to limit me in terms of what I'm doing in the city is what I'm saying, I think. So this building that I put the parking lot on and that I'm adding a few little details to now is apparently a real supermarket in Havana, Cuba. And I think it just fits in nicely here. Also gets a solid 3.0 out of 5 stars on Google Maps, so not bad. So I just thought that was kind of cool to include that. It's always nice to have buildings that have a little bit of Spanish on them. I'm not going to restrict myself to buildings that advertise in Spanish because I wouldn't be able to build a big city without just using the same 3 or 4 assets over and over again. But it's just always nice when you can get that extra little touch, especially on a real eye-catching building like that. Or at least I think it's eye-catching for me compared to all the assets that I'm used to plopping down in this city. And the building also came with this little sign, which is kind of nice. Just allows me to integrate it a little more nicely into the shopping center and make it look like, it's part of this thing here and not just its own deal. It's always tough to figure out what to do with these, empty areas of pavement, especially when you're doing somewhere where you want to go into a bit more detail. Sometimes it's nice just to fall back on the good old expansion joint sidewalk look. It doesn't really get easier than that in terms of getting bang for your buck for the amount of move it, copying and pasting work you have to do. And if you're feeling really lazy, just put down some stained decals. Works every time. Okay, I'm going to speed through these trees here because you've seen me put down trees before. I have these new palms that I really like. They're quite high try, so I'm not going to spam them everywhere. But I just think they have a nice, lush look. So I've been using them in more focus areas like this. So that's pretty much it for the shopping center, other than a couple more things we're going to do just to get a little bit of context for where we are before we move on to the next part of the video. Like I'm setting up a general idea of where the road's going to go through here that comes out of the back of the parking lot and runs through the housing project we're going to do. And then one of my favorite uses for node controller here is you can take a wide road and a skinny road and just kind of squeeze them together there and just get a nicer transition between 2 different sizes of roads. Of course, you can also do that by increasing the corner offset. That's another helpful way to do that. But sometimes you just don't have the space for really long segments. Well, anyway, I thought we needed a little bit of context to this shopping center because it feels kind of weird just to have it by itself without any other sort of commercial or office development. So I just have this little office building here just to give it a little bit of a border and a little bit of buffer from the housing project. Just going to put my favorite billboard up on this building here so people on the freeway can get a full view of it. And maybe they'll want to stop in this shopping center and grab some medalla. This place has been catching my eye every time I go to San Juan on Google Maps, so we're going to build something inspired by it. I hope you don't mind if I skip embarrassing myself by trying to pronounce the name, but basically it's a government housing project in San Juan. I just think it's very cool how all the buildings are at quite a different angle than everything else, even from the road network as a whole. So I just wanted to get that look and just have this area that kind of stands out a bit and just generally adds to the feeling of Todos Santos as being a city with all different kinds of development in it. I'm using this pack of buildings, which are made to be clipped together, and they just have the right look for this kind of housing, I think. And by complete coincidence, these assets are by the same author who released the Supermercado that I put down. So definitely go check them out if you're interested in this sort of building. All of these assets, as usual, can be found down in the description with my completely updated mod list, which, by the way, I don't usually mention this, but I probably should. It's a 3-part mod list because of the item limit on Steam Workshop collections. I just preemptively split it into 3 parts. So the one that's linked in the description is for assets, but then there are 2 associated mod lists. One that includes the actual game modifications, and the other that includes building assets like these. And now I'm just doing a very simple courtyard here. Overall, the detail for this area is going to be quite simple and lightweight compared to what I sometimes do. Part of that is just my lack of familiarity with this kind of area, so maybe not having the knowledge or the confidence to really get the minuscule details right. Part of it was I was having some technical problems, so I was getting a little frustrated with the game. Basically what happened is that the game would just slow down to a crawl occasionally, which, I mean, it already runs fairly slow normally, but it was particularly bad in this instance. I think I figured out that it was not an issue with my game or with the save, because it's since cleared up. I think it must have been Windows was doing something silly in the background and not alerting me of it, or something along those lines, because the problem has since resolved itself, which is always good, because anytime something starts happening on the technical side with this game, I get a little worried that something's going to happen to the save. But thankfully, that did not happen. And then I also realized at this point of filling in this whole area, that's the focus of this series of episodes, is that I just needed to pick up the pace a bit. So I'm not going to completely avoid detailing this area. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm just saying that I need to pick and choose my battles and pick the places that I think are going to benefit the most from the detailing. So I just figured this place was here for the housing, of course. That's the primary reason, because we get a lot of people that move in here, which is nice. But then also just for the aerial look and having this kind of strange angle of all these buildings here. And that's not to say there's no detailing here, but I just, I'm not able to go in and place an individual trash can outside of every house or something like that. That's just not going to happen. And really, this episode had a couple of false starts. I tried various different ways to get on-street parking, like not parallel parking, but angled parking. And I guess I didn't have the right assets, or I just wasn't in the right mindset. I just could not get something that looked good, no matter how many different things I tried. So I had to scrap all that. And then I also had, in addition to the other technical issues, I also had an issue where I had placed down, I actually forgot, I should have mentioned this last episode. I had placed down all the road network for this area that you saw me make last time. And I had made a partial cloverleaf interchange that is right next to this area, which we're going to be detailing later in the episode, by the way. And then I had a problem where the game would not save. So something happened to this, I think it was like a simulation crash while the game was saving. So I just had an infinite save loop, which I have not experienced in a long time since I've stabilized my mod list. But that happened and I lost all that progress. So yeah, it took me a while to even get to the point where I could put the buildings down, let alone detail them. Thankfully, that save issue has not happened again though, so I'm very happy about that. I think it was just, there was something I was doing at the time I saved that the game did not like. Anyway, I think I'm just babbling at this point, trying to come up with excuses for me not wanting to detail every single area. Which, when I say it out loud, that sounds kind of fair, honestly. But I also don't want to, make an ugly, undetailed city. Okay, so now I'm making this very undersized baseball diamond, but I had this kind of watermelon wedge-shaped block. I'm going to call it watermelon wedge. Why not? Why is it that my brain is going to fruit shapes for all these road layouts? That's a question for another day. Anyway, it's a baseball diamond. It's too small, and it's not the most detailed build I've ever done. And yes, I do know that I put home plate backwards. I apologize for that. But it's a little bit of a trial run for something that we're going to do later in the series that is a little bit more impressive in my opinion. But I just figured they would need an area to recreate in this housing project. And the one I'm basing it off of in real life seems to have that sort of thing and some services and a school. So I'm going to be adding all of that as well, not just filling it with all these cookie cutter apartments. And now at this point, I'm finding that it's a little awkward to have these two areas right next to each other. So I'm just trying to put a few details in to make it look a little bit more logical and just kind of just keep these areas a little bit more separate. So I have this retaining wall just to block off the back of the store there up against this parking lot for that office building there. And one pattern I noticed in the inspiration for this build is that it's kind of simultaneously like both its own area and also kind of integrated into the rest of the city, if that makes any sense. So like the road network hooks up just to the normal roads. There aren't any like restricted entrances or anything. But it really feels like its own area and it's a little bit fenced off. So I was just trying to find a balance there between separation and integration here. And I guess I'm not 100% sure of how it's set up in real life or how the optimal setup would be. Are all these buildings like exclusively for the people who live in this area, or is it just like normal city services, or I really don't know. If you know anything about this sort of thing, let me know. Because I would prefer to not remain ignorant on the subjects that I'm building. Anyway, there's this little administration area, I guess, where you'd have, I think that's a clinic on the right, and then just an office building in the center here, which is actually apparently modeled off a office that is actually in Puerto Rico, which is always cool to see. And then earlier, up against the back of the shopping center parking lot, there was a very nice school asset, which I guess would serve all the children here, potentially children elsewhere. Like I said, I don't know exactly how that works. And I felt like making a really confusing parking lot there, so I just split it up into 3 parts for some reason, just to kind of fill up the area. So I mentioned before, I seem to never have the right asset on hand to make a basketball court, so I just make one from scratch here with a single stain decal and 2 hoops. So I am very happy to report, though, that as of the time of this commentary, I have downloaded a pack of very, very nice looking basketball court assets. So someday in the series fairly soon, you'll be able to see those in action. Okay, so now I'm just trying to finish setting up the stage for the infrastructure of this area. So I make a little sidewalk for this road, which I really like. I've mentioned this before in the series, but I really like this little road. And I just felt like there should be paved sidewalks here. The only problem with doing it like this, and same if you do it on any other freeway part that doesn't have built-in sidewalks, is that you obviously can't have raised sidewalk. So it just feels a little strange to have a sidewalk right up against a road that isn't up on a curb. It seems a little dangerous for pedestrians, but I'm just not going to worry too much about that detail at this point. Oh yeah, and there's that very nice fence asset there. It's actually it's the amusement park fence from the, I guess that would be the Park Life DLC. I just think it has like kind of a nice weathered metal look, so I wanted to use that there. Okay, we're not done with the housing project yet, but I just wanted to take a little bit of a break from that. And I thought the commercial area just seemed a little lonely, and it seemed a little weird to have this big development just kind of in the middle of nowhere. So I wanted to give it just a little bit of context and surround it with a little bit more of a business area. And just going with the same theme, it's just a pretty standard strip mall kind of thing, with, of course, a giant setback parking lot. And this little taco place, which I figured that San Juan is a quite cosmopolitan place, so I think Todos Santos should be as well. And I mean, most of the commercial buildings I put down aren't even, branded as any, being a restaurant with a specific cuisine or anything, but, we'll just have to imagine that there are like taco stands and Korean barbecue places all over the city. Because it's just, it's one of those things where I'd like to have a ton of unique assets with, that have their own branding. Like you get in real life, you have businesses with, really strange logos and stuff and big signs and everything. But that's just the kind of thing that really adds up in terms of filling up your RAM when you're loading the game. And just generally, it's just very easy to be overwhelmed with that kind of asset subscribing. So overall, I'm just not really able to go into that kind of detail for the most part. Maybe when I do a smaller, more detailed city again someday, I'll be able to get into that kind of specificity and the sorts of businesses they have here. And I could almost see like going that sort of route with like a chain or something. Get a McDonald's analog asset or something, and then you just have to have one, but then you can kind of put it all over the city without it looking silly. I mean, it looks silly in its own way, but it's not unrealistic to do that necessarily. I don't necessarily want to go that route. For the most part, I try to avoid like real life branding in my cities, except for the rare occasion where you get something like a Medalla billboard, where it's just like, oh, I have to do that because it's Puerto Rican. But that's something where I might, like when I get to the outskirts of the city and you have more recent, more American-looking development than we already do in the city, that might be something I'll have to look into, just because I'm going to need ways to switch it up a bit and, not just keep using the same assets over and over and over again in the city. I mean, I'm not necessarily looking to like tell a story of the city's development or anything. Like, I'm not worried too much if it doesn't seem realistic to have the old town where it is versus the newer development or that kind of thing. I mean, that's probably not a good example because the old town in Todos Santos is exactly where it is in San Juan. But I'm just not that worried overall about the progression of the city in like the historical sense, not in the way I'm building it, but just in if there were a history to the city, I don't necessarily need that to be completely realistic or completely sensible. Like I mentioned before, I'm mostly playing for the aesthetic of it and just creating a city that I like the look of, whether or not the individual elements are necessarily to my liking. I want to make something where you can pull back and just kind of enjoy the view of the city from afar. And I think part of that enjoyment does come from the realism to a degree. I've always made cities in this game that haven't really scratched that itch in terms of pulling back and having it look like you're looking at a city on Google Maps or whatever. So I think to that degree, realism plays a part in what I'm going for. So I'd like to have the big picture stuff seem sensible, whereas every single little detail, I'm just going to try not to agonize over that too much. Case in point, I'm just mostly trying to cover up the kind of awkward shapes that these walkways have put down, but trying to integrate them also in a way that it looks like there's a system of pathways around this area, because I imagine they'd want to make it somewhat walkable so you could go around and visit other people without having to navigate a veritable maze of sidewalks and roads and that kind of thing. I mean, it kind of looks like a maze a little, but I just wanted to make sure there were clear paths for people to take. And I mean, I could use Surface Painter to get rid of those little blips of extra concrete where the walkways are popping up on the opposite side of the road from the buildings, but then that also removes the sidewalk pavement that's already built into the road, so I just didn't want to go down that path. So I'm really just trying to do the best I can to cover it up and make it look clean, because I think one of the most annoying things in this game from a detailed perspective for me is that the Surface Painter materials just often don't look very smooth. They either are too rounded for what you're doing, or they're too sharp when you want a round look, and you can't get a more natural look to make a skinny path or something. So really I'm just trying to, instead of work with the limited tools that we have for that kind of painting, I just wanted to cover it up with hedges and bushes, and when that fails, I use those concrete brushes, which are very helpful for getting nice, clean lines with that Surface Painter material. And then just to round off the look of the landscape here, just putting down a variety of trees. I really love these acacia trees. I think they add a nice look. I will say, the new tree snapping mod, or I guess it's just like a tree anarchy mod that includes all the, all the snapping and anarchy and that sort of thing, is very good overall, but it seems to be a lot stickier than the old one. Or maybe I'm just not used to using tree snapping or whatever, because I used to not use it. But I find it kind of annoying that like you're just not quite able to predict exactly like what surface it's snapping to. So sometimes when you think it's on the ground and you place it, and then you take a closer look and you see that the tree is hovering 10 feet off the ground, that's just kind of annoying. Maybe there's a way to decrease that sensitivity or something while still having the tree snapping option enabled. I don't know. I suppose I could just turn it off while I do tree placement of that sort. But even when you have snapping off, if you're working on any kind of slope, I've noticed that trees will often, they won't actually be on the ground. They'll still be floating, which I assume just is something to do with the way the slopes work in this game. But anyway, not ideal. It's definitely possible that I'm just misunderstanding how the tool works or missing some of its features. In fact, that's probably the most likely thing, but I should probably actually look into that. It's kind of one of those things that just annoys me in the background, and it takes me a while to realize that it's something that maybe I can look into and try to fix. Okay, I really need to stop going on these rants. We're going to finish up the housing project with just a few little details, providing them with some trash collection service in a handy central location. And then, of course, we're doing a lighting pass. And I'm not lighting up every single square inch of street. I just want to do the main road and then any intersections that occur here. So I will relieve you of my voice for a moment, and I'll meet you back in a second to do some more detailing. I always find decorating the off and on ramps in this game to be simultaneously very fun and a little frustrating, because you get these weird shapes. Like there's this little, no, I'm not going to say it, it's not banana shape, but you just get weird little shapes like this that can be kind of annoying to find the right thing to fill. Of course, the best way to take care of that is just to avoid getting that kind of shape in the first place, but I think the highways are just conducive to that kind of shaping in this game. So I just try to force myself to take it very simple and just put down some weeds. That's really what the rest of the episode is going to be about, is me putting down weeds all over the interchanges and freeways that we've been working on over the last couple episodes. By the way, this interchange here is like a partial cloverleaf, a parclo, and this is what I was talking about before, where I made it, and then my save game didn't work. So I had to come back, and apparently in my anger at the game, I forgot to record footage of me putting this together. But it's very simple. I've made partial cloverleaf interchanges on the channel before, so you didn't miss too much, other than me being frustrated, which is probably for the best. The first video that comes to mind, if you do want to watch me make a partial cloverleaf interchange, is, I believe, part 7 of Alpenglow, my snowfall city, which has been long completed at this point. But I will put a card up here, and I will put a link in the description, like I said, just in case you're interested. But I'm just going for the usual details with some barriers and stripe markers, just to really give the freeway that extra bit of definition and make it look like a real road network. And my mission for this entire series of episodes set in this area is just to get the area filled in. Now, obviously, there are blank spots in the freeway. I'm fine with that because we're going to come back to that area south of the freeway at a later point. But for now, I just like to have everything from the frontage road and the off-ramps there all the way back to what we've built previously in the series to be filled in. So that's what we're going to be doing. If I made it sound last episode like we're going to be doing that kind of high-rise development every episode, that's not really true. I'm going to try to keep it fresh every episode. Like next time, it's going to be quite different from what we've been doing the last 2 episodes. It's going to be a bit more natural. I don't think I plop a single building down, maybe 1 or 2. But there's going to be some infrastructure, some tree ploppage, so I hope you are looking forward to that in episode number 35. And it's going to set the stage for a very special episode number 36 that I am really looking forward to. So just to finish the episode, I put down a couple of test bus lines, which we will be expanding a few episodes from now. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Todos Santos. I hope you enjoyed it, and I really appreciate your time, as always. See you on the next one. Bye.